Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why we have to standardize lists for strength comparisons. And this is something that comes up when people will say, well, yeah, but this guy is stronger, this person, they're outlifting them and they're performing some really goofball version of a lift, thinking that it counts. And it's just simply not the case. And this is why, we always say, well, yeah, it needs to be to competition standards for whatever that standardized lift is if you're going to claim that you can lift a certain amount of weight with it. And the reason is because when we're dealing, with making a claim of lifting a weight, it's because you're trying to compare yourself to other people. And you guys see where I'm going with this? You can't compare yourself to other people unless you're performing the same movement that they are. Right? It needs to be the same exercise. Otherwise, you're not stronger than them. If you're doing some much easier version. So when people on the bench press, for example, they don't pause it, or their butt comes off the bench, you're not allowed to count that, and it's because again, bench press is arguably the most contested lift in America. Uh, America's favorite lift. But the point is, you can't claim that you're stronger than someone else. Let's say one guy benches 350 with a proper pause on his chest, butt stays on the bench, and you bench 370, 375 while bouncing it off your chest, and claim, well, it wasn't paused, it was a light touch, and you go, no, half the time, even if they're bouncing it, and then butt comes off the bench, you can't really make that claim. You can't really say, hey, you outbenched that person. You can't, because you're not performing the same lift. And the problem is, with something like not pausing on the chest. The problem with that is there's no way to determine how much you're getting from the touch and go, right? Because some people bounce it. Some people bounce it. And you don't know if you're getting 5 pounds or 50 pounds out of that bounce, because it's really hard to tell even for someone watching. You're definitely getting something out of it, because on a bench press, again, particularly any sort of wider grip at all, off the chest is always the weakest. That's the hardest part of the movement. Same thing, we start talking about, squatting, deadlifting, whatever. This comes up. And I know that we make the argument about sumo versus conventional, and I kind of see both sides of that equation. I see both sides of that equation. Because, look, we look at a lot of sports, again, like powerlifting, we limit the grip width on the bench, but it's still allowed to be very, very wide. When we discuss squats, though, if we're going to compare squatting, you're allowed to use any stance that you want in a squat, right? And actually, your stance is allowed to be whatever you want it to be in a clean and jerk, a snatch, anything else in competition. So the point that people make is, well, then, so why should we limit stance width on the deadlift? All right, that is often a case that's made for the sumo. And I actually do agree with that. While I will also say, though, that it is technically a different lift than a conventional deadlift. But the only reason I say that it's still an okay comparison is because about half of people are stronger at one and half of people are stronger at the other. Right? It depends on a lot of your individual leverages and so on, and some people are balanced on the two. I still think it's a relatively fair comparison, as long as all the other same rules are applied. You're pulling it with no straps. You're not hitching it. All right, they're both pulled from a dead stop off the floor. And that's another point too. We come to deadlift variations. Someone will say, well, this guy pulled this sumo with straps, and then they want to compare it to someone else's raw conventional deadlift. Well, no, you can't do that. All right, you can't do that, because you might be a person who is way better at the sumo in terms of your leverages, and everyone is stronger with straps. And I think that's something that people forget. They're like, well, why let your grip be a limiting factor? Well, because your grip is a limiting factor. This is a test. If you're talking about comparing a lift, that's part of your strength. Grip strength is part of the equation, right? Does grip strength not count as strength? Of course it does. And here's the other thing. Even guys who have really, really strong grips, who don't lose their grip on maxes ever, can usually still pull more when they put straps on. That's invariably been noted. That's been noted many times, that most people are stronger with straps on. They can pull more weight. That doesn't mean they're getting better muscle activation. And by the way, I do a lot of my rep work with straps, right? Mainly because I just don't want to tear my hands up. It's not because, oh, don't let grip strength be a limit. I have no trouble gripping it. I just don't want to shred my hands up, right? Pulling against all that knurling for a lot of reps. But back over to that point. No, you don't get to use that for a comparison, because you're doing something that you know is going to make you stronger compared to the standardized lift. Using straps, you can lift more weight, even if you have a strong grip. Or people will take the trap bar. Well, the trap bar, you can lift more weight. Even the low handle. Studies have found on average, most people lift 8% more on the low handle than they do off of a conventional or a sumo deadlift. 8%. You put the high handles on, we start adding hundreds of pounds. In other words, someone, that's kind of a trick lift that people will do to say, well, I deadlift this amount of weight. It's a high handle trap bar. And even funnier if they strap up for it. Because, again, I have seen people who can barely deadlift 500, sumo or conventional raw, who can pull 650, 700 on a high handle trap bar. So no, if you only deadlift someone else, like their real deadlift on a high handle trap bar, if you only beat them by 50 or 100 pounds, you're probably not stronger than they are. You're probably weaker than them. And so on and so forth. And this is kind of the point when we're making comparisons of strength. These things exist because that's the only way to compare different people. You have to have a similar metric. And a lot of times the competition versions of these lifts are put in a way to remove cheating, right? Because there's no way to know how much you might be cheating on an exercise, right? Again, things like the pausing on the bench, because the amount of bounce could massively impact it. There is no way to standardize and compare the lift if you're allowed to touch and go. There's no way to compare it because some people are going to just be better at bouncing it off their chest than others, which has nothing to do with strength. They developed a separate skill. And that's the whole point of standardizing lifts, is so that we can compare. But by that same token, if you choose to do a harder version, you don't get bonus points, right? If a person says, well, I'm going to ask to grass Olympic squat. Okay, well, that's still your squat. You don't get bonus points for that. You choose to use a closer grip bench. You don't get bonus points for that. In fact, some people are stronger at close grip. So on and so forth. But because, again, we're going back over to these lifts have been standardized, to compare people. And you might actually be stronger than them if you tie on that harder version. You actually might be. But, in any form of competition, remember, you don't get bonus points for that. You're comparing inside the rules on a standardized lift. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.